He's a writer, producer, and director, best known for Moll Flanders, plus the reboots of the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits series. He's produced films such as Backdraft and more recently Harriet. And in 1991, Hood Prince of Thieves he wrote and produced, which became the biggest grossing film of the year and one of Warner Brothers' top grossing films. His book on screenplay writing, Writing the Alligator, has made me a better writer, and I would recommend it to everybody. Welcome to the show, Pen Densham. How are you, my friend?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for inviting me to join you, Jack.
Hey, thank you for doing this. Your work has really changed me for the better in so many ways, and you're somebody who's been a real mentor to me in my work. So I think it's just going to be so much fun to be able to unpack some of your tips on writing, plus hear about your remarkable career in Hollywood. And so you weren't from Hollywood. You came from a foreign land. Is that right?
Well, I say I'm British by accident, Canadian by choice, and forced to live in Los Angeles. Um, I grew up with a family that was making short films when I was a little kid, and so my dad and my mom took me with them when they were shooting movies about people keeping strange pets. At the age of 4, I wrote an alligator in one of my parents' movies that actually toured with Africa Queen. And at that point, I watched the way that people responded to cameras, and I watched how a camera sucked an image and then blew it up onto a giant screen. And they took them with me to meet the people who were distributing their movies in Water Street. And so at 4, I'm seeing this magic world. And I just fell in love with it. I wanted to cast spells as a kid, and I've never lost that joy of trying to capture things with a camera or with words. And I never wanted to be ordinary. And so, and I also, you're complimenting me, but I also get a great kick out of you and your sister having formed the film festival. And again, it's like you dream something, you make it happen. And that's what our business is. And there's no real rules, and there's no, much as I wrote a book, my book was to try and help inspire people not to worry about rules, but to follow their own hearts and find their own voice. Because that's the way that you get to things, is passion. So, and you guys have done amazingly well with your festival and the people you've influenced and the guests that you've brought. So I'm as impressed with what you've done as you are, flattering me. So.
Well, manifesting is really something that you do. So, whether it's a blank page or a project that's just in the early stages as far as a film or a television show, what do you think it is about being able to have that vision and then bring it to fruition? I think Charlie Chaplin said, imagination is nothing without doing.
Well, I think, it's like I've got more dead projects than I've got live ones. That's the first thing. I think part of it is following instincts and seeing how far they will go. And once in a while, one of them just pours out like a gusher. And sometimes you can be at the right place, but with the wrong material, or you can be, the right place with the right material and the right opportunities. And I have scripts that I yearn to get produced, and I haven't been able to figure out how to do them. So the things that I've learned over the years, because I quit school at 15, it was too scary. I was no good at math. I may have one of those learning disorder things. I don't know. I was hearing there's a book about people with learning disorders and that they create differently, and their stuff tends to be more unique and get noticed more. So maybe I'm lucky that I'm having that process, but leaving school because I was running away. I didn't want to be processed. I didn't feel like I was good enough, and tried to use photography and storytelling and things to fulfill me. But I got to tell you, anxiety comes with that. And I think the creative mind is an anxious mind. And so you kind of look for people around you to give you support while you go on these journeys. And I'll often bounce things off people. Say, what do you think about, a priest going to the moon because they found the devil's bones up there and they need someone to stop astronauts from being possessed, go, and I'll see whether people respond to that. And if I get enough good responses, then I'll start to doodle it. I try not to make my stories overwhelming when I'm working on writing something. I feel like if you put too much objectivity into the process, you kind of has to be perfect. It has to be as good as this. It's like you got to sit down and write the next Raiders. You put yourself in a place where the pressure on you is very harsh. But if you say you're going to play, and I've found that often that some of my best ideas happen to me in the shower, and then you get out of the shower and you make a note. And frequently, they're the endings of movies, and then that the emotion that I get from the ending, I'll test drive with somebody and say, "What do you think about that?" So, and I call those people story midwives. I don't talk to people who are curmudgeonly or jealous or not. And some people are brilliant and warm, but they still don't have the ability to make magic leaps, jumps. And so you'll tell them something that'll never work. And those are the people you have to avoid when you're early in the creative process. So I say ideas are like small children. If you shout at them, they go away. And so you have to find people that can blow on the embers with you. Or sometimes they do actually possess you. And that happens so rarely. But when it does, it's joyous. It's intoxicating. After writing Robin Hood, my body, and I love sharing this because it's so freaking weird. My body had a gut instinct that I was going to write a woman's story, and it was going to be a historical character, and it was going to be important and profound to me. And I kept looking for 2 years at things like Moll Flanders, not Moll Flanders, sorry, Molly Malone and Nell Gwynn, and looking for that story that would ignite me, and found nothing. And then one day I was listening to NPR radio, and they were talking about an orphans and foundlings home in England that had become a museum, and they had letters that were 200 years old from women who'd left their babies on the doorstep. And I thought, what does a woman write to a child that she's abandoning? What story does she tell that? And a few hours later, I found myself writing the end of a movie, which was, what say you, child, now that you've heard your mother's story, thinking that she'd been read a letter, and a little waif, a 6-year-old from an orphanage says, you could throw me out without a crust to eat before I deny that woman is worthy of my love. And she says, prepare yourself, child, for I am that woman, I am your mother. And that ending made me tear up. I shared it with my secretary, who had done a thesis on Sheroes at Brown, and she teared up. And I kind of thought what I was writing would be a story of a woman who accidentally or improvidently lost her kid through growing up in the 1700s and tough times, and had managed to bring her child back, but didn't want to trick her into loving it. Wanted to hear her story and all of her flaws and failings. And if she still loved her then, she hadn't forced herself on the child. And started writing it. And I get a scene here, I get an idea there, and I love Final Draft. In fact, I am a mentor to the winners of the Final Draft contest every year. But when I'm really early in something, I try and write just to kind of note form with bits of script in it, because I don't want to overwhelm myself by starting to worry about layout and format and the expectations. I want to play. And so by using just a straight text document, you can drop ideas in it. You don't have to feel that you can switch things around easily. You don't have to feel intimidated by it. And that one story possessed me, and it was like hitting a gusher into your soul, and the oil kept pouring out. And I'm writing it and not telling my two male partners that I'm writing it, because I didn't want them to poo-poo me out of writing a strong woman's story. Who am I to write a woman's story? I don't know. The guy that wrote Robin Hood is now going to write a woman's story. But the thing just kept pouring out of me, and language and dialogue, and it reinforced something I believe, that when you surrender to what your heart wants you to write, when you surrender to passion scripts, which I call life scripts, these things are summoning parts of your nature, parts of the gestalts of your existence, your community, the hard knocks that you've experienced, and they're coming through you in some kind of creative process that ends up being a story which manifests those issues, so that you can speak to the rest of your community. Then on spec. I wrote out of my body this kind of like, what do I want to speak to? What do I want these characters to do? And every day I would show the pages to my partner, John. Every day I thought they were awful. And that's the interesting thing about writing. You can't judge what you're writing at the same time as you're writing it. There's a critic in us. The fucking thing sits on our shoulder going, I'm sorry, am I allowed to swear or not to swear? Excuse me. And it nags us, but it's a survival mechanism saying, don't go in that cave, you could get eaten. Don't do this, you know. But you have to ignore it because it has no evidence of something that doesn't yet exist. And so you have to let things come out of you despite your critic and look at them and judge them, you know, days later and suddenly go, wow, I couldn't write that if you put a gun to my head now.
Now, you've had this massive success at the time, and you've now convinced the studios that you are really worthy of investing in. How does that change your career and your life at the time?
One of the things that we had done before, we had been in a position to come to Hollywood and were asked to fix up movies. We were responsible for re-editing Rocky II, Victory, Paradise, not Paradise Alley. We didn't actually re-edit that, but we helped Stallone with it. And as filmmakers that had mostly worked on documentaries, and we had a hands-on attitude to filmmaking, which was different from most people's. But we hadn't been able to break through into the big leagues of being taken seriously as feature filmmakers. And we also, you know, just looking, what can we do that appeals to our nature? You know, the thing is, I hate work. And work is when you're doing something you don't like, but you have to do it. And play or discovery is when you have something you're passionate about and can explore it. So we got the opportunity to play. And one of the strange things was, I was asked if I would like to create some TV series, and one of them was a sci-fi thing, which I got 6 episodes made, called Space Rangers, and that game was fantastic because you could dream up a you know, distant frontier planet and a whole bunch of characters and aliens, and it was literally one of the most joyous periods. And then you also, with TV, you've got a gang of people helping you. You have writers' rooms. You have more than your own brain power to go at it. And as a result of that, I was then asked if I would like to try and reestablish the Outer Limits TV series on television, which was, along with the Twilight Zone, one of my favorite things when I was growing up. Good, scary TV as a kid, you know, the stuff that you kind of like peek through your handset some days. And I had, the studio was MGM, and they were asking if I could put characters into the Outer Limits and turn it into like a 2-character drama piece. And I actually spoke to Frank Darabont because I trusted his instincts. And I said, Frank, what do you think about this? And he said, yeah, it's an anthology series. It's a treasure. You can only do it as an anthology, otherwise you destroy its purpose. And you know, the X-Files was so successful at that time. That's why they wanted repeated characters. But I sat down and wrote a letter to the studio and to Showtime with lots of little ideas for stories that were the sort of, because I collect stories. As they occur to me, I make little notes. As I said, you go in the shower and suddenly something gestalts. I actually have a waterproof pen and wet proof writing paper in my shower. So I collect my ideas there. And so I wrote this letter with all kinds of little squib ideas for science fiction stories and sent it in and said, essentially, I don't want to be the person that turns this into an ongoing two-handed drama, but if you want to do the anthology version, which allows people to talk to like parables, like Jesus tells you stories, we're telling stories that teach you about human nature through the lens of science fiction. Here's some of the ideas, and I got a yes. And the most fun thing was our first story that we shot as our pilot was a George R. Martin short story called The Sand Kings. So that's how I got to know George and became great friends. And that was our, that was a 90-minute, I think, version of his story. And we then went on where each other episode was a 1 hour. And the joy of that is it's like everyone was a little feature. And every week we were turning out, we needed new dramas, new costumes, new actors. It was challenging, but we had a wonderful team of people working with us. It was no one individual can make an anthology series work. And it was any idea that was really, vivacious and interesting and intriguing could be explored. And then as that was coming to an end, and our group had put together 165 of these over several years, I was playing with the idea of doing my own anthology series and realized that selling an anthology to the networks is very hard. So I decided that maybe there was one other thing I had heard about, which was that the Twilight Zone was owned by CBS. And I went off to Les Moonves, who I knew at CBS because his kids and I went to the same school. And we worked on a TV series called The Magnificent Seven with him, which we'd come up with as an idea. Another one of those things, let's do a cowboy show. And we got 20 of those on the air. And Les said yes, then he said no. And I was very frustrated. And I said to him, why do you not want to do this? And he said, it's anthologies don't work on TV. So I came back to him after thinking about it and said, yeah, they do. Wait a minute. You've got 2 anthologies on your network. They're #1 shows. They're 60 minutes, different stories every week, same host. Unsolved Mysteries, different stories every week, same host. Well, that's just the Twilight Zone. Different stories every week, same host. It's not going to work. So we go for some period of time. And then I send him a clips reel of what we've been doing from the Outer Limits to show him just what extraordinary images you could do in TV and what kind of special effects you could do on a TV budget in those days was as the technology was improving. And put the Twilight Zone music on it, gave it to his secretary, thought it was cool, gave it to Les. No. And then I heard Les had taken over UPN and their one hit show was Star Trek. And they were looking for things to build around Star Trek to try and make the evening flow. And I go, well, the Twilight Zone would do that. And I talked to my partner, John Watson, about it. I said, why don't you suggest that to Les? Because I've got shut down 3 times in a row already. And he said, no, I don't want to get near Les, getting him angry. And I had this gestalt. I know how to do it. I don't want to talk to him. I'm going to write him a letter. And so my letter to him was, dear Les, I swear I'll never mention the words Twilight Zone to you ever again after this. How about making it a companion piece to Star Trek? I was in his office the next day. He gave me 10 days to write anything I wanted. And I thought, well, if I write just a presentation or if I write just a partial script, that's an excuse to get off the hook. So I forced myself to write a full 1-hour screenplay, which I didn't know I could do in 10 days flat. We were shooting it within 40 days from then with Jonathan Frakes directing it.
So, okay, where does it go from there? So now you've not just had a big hit movie, but you've shown that you can have a big show on, was CBS's Les Moonves? So
well, the Twilight Zone went out on UPN, and the Outer Limits went out on Showtime and a number of other channels that was put into syndication. So it was incredibly well circulated. And then what happened? Well, again, one of the things about this business is persistence of vision. We failed more times than we succeeded. We tried constantly to figure out how do you get your movies made, and there are more. I liken the scripts to sperm in Los Angeles. There are thousands of scripts floating around looking for that egg of production, and people defeat themselves sometimes because they don't manage to get something produced, but it's not an indictment. When you look at the Oscars every year, there's only 200 or so films that are eligible for Oscars, which means only 200 or so movies have been shown in theaters at a period of time in order to qualify. And the number of projects that could possibly be made into movies are vast in number. So we tried to figure out how do you break through that barrier, get your movies on the screen. We'd read that some of the bigger producers who had succeeded, like Guba Peters, had 80 projects in development. So while we were working with MGM, I came up with, can we put a lot of projects in development, because maybe that breaks the dam and you get more opportunities. We ended up with 30 projects in development. And some of them were mine, and some of them were writers, and sometimes, but what happened was we just lost control. We couldn't keep the material strong enough because everything really deserves a lot more close-up care and nurturing. Writers, we're kind of like the starters, we're the igniters, but the director will come in with a vision, or actors will bring things to the screenplay. And one of the reasons I will direct every now and again, and directing's hard work, is because I want my vision to stay on the screen. And whereas other times I'm willing to see other people grow from a seed that I've created and then see where it goes.
Yeah, when you say never lecturing, is that the same as being heavy-handed?
Mhm.
Maybe you could tell us writers listening any tips, if you have them, on how to avoid being heavy-handed, or how to recognize if you're writing something that may be heavy-handed.
Well, I think the example that's best is my use of an Arab in Robin Hood. Um, my goal was to write a character who was supposedly the enemy at a time when it was fashionable to make Muslims terrorists and bad guys, and show him to be a hero of great intellect and great kindness. And I felt that that mission, putting a Muslim and a Christian working side by side, was valuable, but it wasn't there to go, hey, you got to behave, you got to like these people. No, it was, let's make him entertaining. Let's make him someone you would want to know. Let's make his, the fact that he knows how to put a telescope out, or how, make gunpowder, which was both like taking a little liberty, but, there was possibilities that Arabs knew how to do those things. So that, there was fun in it, not a hard lecture. I don't think audiences want to be forced. I hide the medicine is the way the best is. Coat it with story and coat it with character. But if there is a message, it makes the movie richer.
Where do you get an idea that there should be an Arab and a Christian friendship in a major motion picture, in a Robin Hood story? Is that, how does that come to you?
I think it came, as I said, because I had had the privilege of having a son with my wife. And you start to look at the world, which is bifurcated, it's antagonistic. And you're saying, well, if I could make a statement that was kind and that let people see optimism and constructive engagement, you need to find your tribe. You need to find what you're good at and then be reinforced to it. And when we're writing, or when we're creating something, we have this hypothetical dream, this thing that doesn't exist yet, that we're trying to turn into a reality, which is massive work. And we need encouragement. We need to see other people doing it. And we also need to know that failure is part of the journey. It's not a bad sign when you fail. You just end up getting more opportunities to fix the things until eventually it looks so simple and obvious that other people look at it and say, why can't I write that easily? So that book, the Creative Person Success Manual, and a free chapter it's called Yes, But Can I Write, are available from my website, writingthealligator.com, because I yearn to encourage others to find the things I've done. And I also don't want to be held up as a giant success, because, I've got scripts that I should have made and I chickened out. I've got things I should have done that I've not been able to accomplish. And I say my errors of omission are worse than my errors of commission. And it's part of that is, if I'm imperfect and doing things, then maybe other people who feel they're imperfect can be inspired to take on those risks. Because once in a while, they work. It's not that everyone works. What happens is there's a book called The Drunkard's Walk, which uses quantum physics and says, that eventually the drunk will arrive at the right place at the right time. We're sort of like that drunk. We've got a project, we've got an idea, we got opportunity. Does it all come together? And it won't if you don't try. But nothing is lost if you work from passion.
You can get his book, Riding the Alligator, from writingthealligator.com. I have to agree that what it really comes down to is some kind of magic. I know a lot of people out there listening have been touched by the magic of your words. I know I have. And that's a show, Pen. So we can chat a little more. If there's anything else you want to say, go ahead. But it's been an honor having you and a privilege. And thank you so much.